Hi, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the theories of intelligence. This is a lecture for you just to listen to. There's a couple activities for you to do along the way, but those will all be optional. So as we begin talking about the theories of intelligence in psychology, there's a general kind of definition of intelligence as the ability to gather and use information in a variety of helpful and productive ways. So it's not just the accumulation of stuff in your head. You have to be able to apply that whether on a day-to-day basis or a variety of difficult cognitive tasks to your job, to your life at hand. What we're going to see in a moment is that there are several different forms of intelligence that are acknowledged by different fields of psychologists. So there's kind of disagreement again on what counts as intelligence and how we quantify what that means. However, there is general agreement in this one area that fluid and crystallized intelligence are going to be different things, right? So we typically think about a lot of, perhaps the work that we do in school, the learning that you do in school, and the ways that we measure intelligence as a form of crystallized intelligence, right? You gather knowledge over the course of a unit or a semester, and then you kind of dump it out. You prove it on an assessment in some way. Fluid intelligence is going to differ from that slightly in the sense that what you're doing is basically not just accumulating information, but you are adapting a set of skills that helps you solve problems and basically take in new information and do something with it in the moment, right? So we have both a little visual on the right-hand side of both fluid intelligence, maybe like working with a puzzle, crystallized intelligence having to do with discrete like packets of information that we're gathering over time. Right. There are going to be a variety of different psychologists who are going to study theories of intelligence. Lots of folks are going to say that intelligence can be measured by a single general ability. Other people are going to argue against that, particularly a man named Howard Gardner, who's going to come up with this list of multiple intelligences, which you've probably heard of before. He's going to say that people can have linguistic, logical, mathematical, spatial intelligence and so on. And then again, there's like several subcategories for spatial intelligence as well. He's also going to say that people can have intrapersonal and interpersonal intelligences as well. And that helps them relate to themselves as well as relate to other people. And he's even going to coin something called a naturalist intelligence, people gifted at recognizing and organizing the things that they see in the natural world. So if you were to go on a hike with them or otherwise, they would be able to easily categorize kind of information from their kind of natural surroundings. What we're going to do now is we're actually going to take Gardner's multiple intelligences test. So if you could go to the link at the very bottom of the screen, it is the literacynet.org. assessment to find your strengths. I'm going to click over to that tab so you can see it. It's going to take you just a few minutes. You're going to answer a couple of questions on a scale of 1 to 5, whether they describe you or not. And I'm going to ask that you go ahead and put your top 3 intelligences into the chat, aka think about them for yourself for now, for people to see. Okay, these were my top 3. My top one was intrapersonal, so having a good sense of self. The second one was social or interpersonal, developing ideas and learning from other people. And lastly, I thought this was kind of funny and maybe not as applicable to me, but body movement or kinesthetic. So I like to move, dance, wiggle, walk, and swim. So the idea of learning and my intelligence is being focused, particularly around people as well as movements. Go ahead and take a moment, pause the video here, take that test and figure out for yourself where you fit. Alongside the idea of Gardner's multiple intelligences, we have a psychologist named Daniel Goleman who's going to coin the idea of emotional intelligence. Again, this is kind of actually piggybacking off of the idea of inter and intrapersonal intelligences that Gardner coined first. It's essentially, Goleman does these studies around people with a particularly high emotional intelligence, and then kind of follows their lives and what kind of career paths, what relationships look like for them, and so on. And basically what his research puts forward is this idea that IQ, right, your intelligence quotient or otherwise, don't always become the most successful people in life. Again, depending on how you measure success, but we're thinking about this probably in terms of job and career. What he says is that as he follows people who are highly successful in their fields, there's oftentimes a need for a kind of a balance between high IQ and high EQ, or AKA the ability to relate to other people, read other people, and in a sense, almost like socially connect with other individuals. You can take a moment to think about this. What do you think is a job or career that might require high emotional intelligence or interpersonal intelligence? Not all jobs are going to require as high of, in varying degrees. So what's one that you could think of that might do that? Other theories of intelligence are going to include Robert Sternberg's triarchic theory of intelligence. Again, this is kind of built off that same foundational idea of multiple intelligences, right? He kind of breaks it down into 3 different categories that he likes to study. He's going to say the first is analytic, second is practical, and the third is experiential or creative. And so again, analytic going to be a little bit more of what we're doing in school, what it feels like you're doing maybe day in and day out in your science, your math, your English, your history classes. Your practical intelligences have to do with like how to navigate the real world, right? How to deal with conflict, how to be scrappy and adapt to your immediate circumstances. And then lastly, your experiential or creative really has to with like your ability to create, right? Your ability to face a novel new situation and adapt to it. I'd like for you to think, if you were to choose out of these 3 different types of intelligences, which one would you pick and why? Right? Intelligence tests, again, are going to go about trying to measure, again, human intelligence, which is a pretty complicated thing to try to design a standardized test around. One of the first people that's going to try to make an effort to do this is a French psychologist named Alfred Binet, and he's going to actually start from a place of wanting to help students who were falling behind in school. He really was trying to create a tool that would help measure people's intelligence as a way of providing them with additional supports, right? So a way of figuring out, right, how people could learn better. He's going to base his idea off of something called your mental age, right? And again, the premise of this is that like over time, you should grow more and more intelligent as you age, right? Again, until you reach older adulthood and you struggle with like amnesia or forgetting, right? Over the course of your life, you should become older and more intelligent, right? That's kind of the same trajectory. And so what he does is he creates kind of the beginnings of the first standardized intelligence test. And his work is going to be grabbed by a man named Louis Terman, who is a professor at Stanford University. And he is going to use Binet's like kind of original calculation and idea of a mental age, not a physical age, but a mental age, to create the Stanford Binet IQ test, which is kind of the most popularly used and known and recognized intelligence test that we have today. This math is incredibly simple. It essentially says that your intelligence quotient, or your IQ, is your mental age, whatever you get on that like standardized test, divided by your chronological age, so how old you actually are, times 100, right? And you would do that simple calculation after the person took their test to determine what their overall IQ was. All right. Since the original kind of Stanford Binet test was developed, there have been offshoots of other different forms of intelligence tests. Again, one of these most popularized by a man named David Wechsler. He designs 3 different tests, typically having to correlate with your specific age, because he says that it's not fair to basically measure the intelligence of a kid against the intelligence of an adult, right? We can kind of sector this off by supposed age and so on. So if you take a look at the slides, there's the WAIS, the WISC, and the WPPSI. And again, that has to do with kids and adults in specific age ranges. Again, he's going to use similar mathematical calculations as the Stanford Binet test, and going to look at IQ scores of people, comparing them again only against their peers. So adults against adults, children for children, and preschool kids against preschool kids. Okay. What's interesting about all these IQ tests, or they're interesting in and of themselves, but something that's interesting is thinking about the kind of creation of the origin of these tests as potentially being biased, right? Again, you can take a moment to consider, do you believe that IQ or common aptitude tests like the SAT standardized test, right? One test created by a set of individuals that is supposed to calculate the intelligence or measure capabilities of maybe millions of people worldwide. Why or why not? All right, what we are going to see is there are going to be some Black psychologists that are going to come forward, particularly George Herman Kennedy and Robert Lee Williams, who are both going to be arguing essentially that there is like a racial bias essentially embedded in the original intelligence tests. And again, if it's hard for you to imagine, it's simply because of the way that questions are written, right? Or what we decide is intelligence. Right? You can see how those factors might potentially cause that panel of people or those set of psychologists who were predominantly white men at this time to create tests based off of what they have calculated or what they have decided are good measures of intelligence. Right? And so again, these two men are going to push back against that idea, and they're going to be, again, critics of those intelligence tests, and also try to argue for different forms of testing, particularly the Robert Lee Williams, the professor of psychology at Washington University, is going to create the Black intelligence test for cultural homogeneity. Right, so they're going to kind of develop their own intelligence tests that they feel are much more culturally responsive and appropriate. And that's going to bring us to the end of lecture. There's a video for you to watch at the end of the slides. It's called Do IQ Test Work. It's from TED Ed, and it's only just a couple minutes long. So I'm going to have you go watch that video now on the original set of slides that are posted on Canvas. And then you are done for today. Have a great rest of your day.